Welcome to this presentation with Renee Rosenberg, and I'm Pat Iyer. Renee is known as the Positivity Pro, and she's a career management counselor. She's a licensed mental health counselor, an emotional intelligence coach, and an intergenerational communication speaker. She works with organizations and people both nationally and internationally, and she helps to foster intergenerational understanding and well being. Renee presents virtually as well as in person, and she's been a member of National Speakers Association, where I first met Renee when I joined the group in 2008. She's been on media, print, she has her website, and she's had the opportunity to spend some time traveling in Japan and learning something of the Japanese culture. She lived in Japan for a while and she's been making multiple trips there over the years, bringing back kimonos. I got my kimono by presenting in Japan. I didn't know Renee at the time that I had an opportunity to speak in Yokohama. Renee, welcome to this, and I'm so excited about what you have to share.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to share this very, very important topic of how people can be happier in their lives, more fulfilled, using these wonderful Japanese philosophies. So thank you for this opportunity, Pat.
You are welcome, and I know that people will want to be able to reach you when this program is over, so I thought we would start by sharing your email address, which is on the screen right now at rrsnbrg@gmail.com.
Thank you, Pat. And if anyone would like additional information about the podcasts, I have two podcasts coming up in the future very soon, and I have two that are recordings from the UK, podcast interviews. And if you'd like one of those, please feel free to email me and I'll send you the recording link.
Thank you, Renee. I know from my experience being in Japan that it is a very unique and beautiful culture. Tell us about what led you to decide to live there and what it was like to adjust to a different culture.
Mm. Well, I'll answer the first question, the second question actually first. And that is to adjust to a different culture, particularly the Japanese culture, was not easy. It's such a very, very different culture, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, Pat, that there are little nuances in the culture that unless someone teaches us what to do and what to say, we have to learn. And we make many, many mistakes. So it's not an easy culture to adjust to. But once you do, it's a quite remarkable culture. And what brought me there? Well, I have to say it was a movie a movie that I heard when I was in graduate school, and I decided to take, and this was not my graduate studies, but I decided to take a film course of international films and watch movies just to relax a bit and just to take my mind off my counseling program. And there was one movie that just changed my life. It was called Ikiru, 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 translated to live. And it was directed by the man who became one of my very, very favorite directors, Akira Kurosawa. And he's known actually for samurai movies, which also kind of inspired me to go to Japan. But it was Ikiru that started it. It was about a Japanese civil servant who was told he had just a few years left to live. And he realized that he never really lived at all. And so he took this time in his life to decide that he had to live and to do things that he'd never done in his life before. And it was one of the most moving, emotional, beautiful films. And I said to myself, I have to go to Japan. I have to learn about this culture that was so amazing. And at that time, I also started watching samurai movies, Pat. And I just loved samurai movies. And it was the same Ikigai was that really portrayed in these movies. And ikigai is one of the concepts that I'd like to speak about. It's about how we live our life. And gai means reason, and iki means life. So it's the reason that we live and the reason that we get up in the morning. It's a beautiful concept, and it's something that's very, very dear to the Japanese and to the way that they live their lives. It's a concept that has 4 elements. And the first element is to love what you do, to do it good, find something that you do good, to give to the world. What is your mission? What are you giving to others? And when they say the world, it could just be to one person. What are you giving to one person? And the last element is to get paid. So it's a very nice concept. It doesn't leave out the element of monetary gain and monetary reward, which is very important, particularly for people who are working. And so ikigai was a very important concept of the Japanese people. And I just learned that. And I learned it also many years later that it's the concept that is mentioned in the blue zones. And this is how people in the blue zones live their life, practicing ikigai. And these are people who live to over 100 in the blue zone. So it was very important to me. And I knew I just had to go to this country and experience and live there and learn from the people in Japan.
And how were you received, Renee?
Oh, well, I was received very well, actually, because I immersed myself in the culture. If you don't immerse, and I think it's anyone who travels to any foreign country, if you stay aloof and you stay apart from the culture and the people, then you don't really learn and feel the experience, and people kind of stay away or are not as friendly or as helpful. They could be helpful, but maybe not as friendly and not as welcoming. So I immersed myself in the culture. I started to take classes. I'm a jeweler, and so I was very eager to study a process called mokamegame, which is wood grain metal. And so studying that and working with other jewelers was very exciting for me. And learning to use Japanese tools was also a very exciting experience. And I also started teaching English in the high school. So I felt that I was accepted into the culture pretty quickly.
When we were taking a tour in Kyoto, we went to a golden temple, and we were with Barbara Levin, who's very blonde. And there were a group of
Oh,
school children who were taking a tour of the temple, and they walked up to her and they wanted to speak English to her, and they wanted her to write down her name on a piece of paper. So it was one of my treasured experiences of watching all of these dark-haired little boys and girls clustered around this flaming blonde-haired woman, asking her questions and talking to her.
It's very common and probably still is common today, although there's a lot more foreigners living in Japan and visiting Japan. I was there in the 1970s, and I actually was followed around also by school children asking me questions. And in those days, Pat, I was much younger, of course, and I used to stay in youth hostels, which were old temples and beautiful homes, and just they weren't like youth hostels of today, or maybe they still are in Japan, but they were huge rooms where we'd all sleep together on tatami mats, and I would be the only one who was not Japanese. And when the lights went out, there would be, I guess they were afraid to ask me when the lights were on, but when the lights were out, I would hear a voice say, "Hello." And they would ask me questions like, "Do you know Elaine Delon? Do you know Charles Bronson?" And I thought, this is their connection. How funny is that? Elaine Delon, I guess he's not Japanese, but he was French. So, and why would I know him anyway? But they must have thought I was like a movie star.
Well, did you know David Bowie?
Well, I did know David Bowie.
See,
Yeah,
we just proved our point. You were a movie star.
I guess so, or a rock fanatic. Yes, I worked for a Japanese designer during the early years that I was in Japan named Kansa Yamamoto, who was one of the most prolific original, amazing designers of Japanese costumes and clothing. And I still actually have many, many of his sweaters and outfits, which are so wild that I'm afraid even to wear them today, but they're so, so beautiful. And he was the man who designed David Bowie's costumes for his first concert in Radio City Music Hall. So while I was there working with Kansai, David Bowie came to Japan and had a meeting with Kansai. And I can't say that I met him, Pat, because he was kind of across the room and I was here, and all I did was stand there like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I got a hello, and how are you? But yeah, it was very, very exciting and quite wonderful. And I got to attend his concert. I flew back in with Kansai Yamamoto to New York to Radio City Music Hall's concert, the first concert for David Bowie in the 1970s.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that was certainly a memorable experience.
Yes, it was.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about the blue zones, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's an article or articles that my husband always attends to when he sees somebody's working, like a physician is still practicing medicine in the 90s, at age 90s. And he's always talking to me about, oh, these are the patterns that we should be following in order to promote longevity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
The blue zones has become very, very popular in the US and all over the world. There was a book written about it with Dan Buettner in 2008. But I went to visit Okinawa, which is one of the blue zones, Pat. You might have known that. And I went to visit that in the 1970s. So it was way before it was even known as a blue zone. And so what are the blue zones? The blue zones are 5 places in the world that are known to have people living the longest, people living over 100. And I think that's kind of an old number. It might be moved up now because we have a lot of 100-year-old people living in the US now also, since
Mm-hmm.
people are living longer. So maybe now they'll revise that number and move it up a bit, or maybe we're just all catching up. But there are people from the 5 different zones throughout the world, and I'll tell you which places those are. One of them is, of course, Okinawa, which is supposed to be the oldest people in the world. There's Greece, a place in Greece. There's a place in Italy. There's somewhere in the US, and there's Costa Rica. So there are 5 different places in the world where you find these people living the longest. And they live the longest by following, in Japan, this process that I've just called ikigai, which is the reason to live, the reason that you get up in the morning. So I went to visit Okinawa before I knew about a blue zone, before it was even written about. And I did notice that people in Okinawa were older than I expected, and very, very active and working. I don't think they believe in retirement. They believe in doing what they love, which is one of the philosophies of Ikigai, of doing good. One of the gentlemen, he looked like he was in his 90s. And then when I asked his family, they told me he was 98. And he would get up in the morning and tend the garden, because he wanted his family to have good produce, good vegetables to be eating for their diet. So he would get up and he would work in the garden most of the day, and he was happy. He was always singing and smiling, and he did that his whole life, never retiring. And so this was a group of people that I found, without knowing, Pat, that there was going to be a blue zone, which was quite remarkable when I learned about that, because I did get to witness that people were living a very long life, and that it's very possible to increase your longevity if you follow these 4 elements that the blue zones stand for. And I'll repeat them again because I think they're extremely important for living one's life with harmony and in happiness and a fulfilling, satisfied life. The first is to do what you love. And I hope there are people here on the call that will be in Ikigai and are doing what they love. And I'm sure they are, because this is a program for caregivers. So doing what you love, being good at it, having a mission for the world. And the world could be just one person. It doesn't have to be a large group of people, just helping one person, showing gratitude to someone. And the fourth one is to get paid. So those four elements are an ikigai, and that's what keeps the people in Okinawa living this long, wonderful, fulfilled, satisfied life.
And I know that you got introduced to these concepts in Okinawa. Tell us about how you started seeing it more and more in subsequent trips back to Japan.
Yeah, I saw this in Okinawa. I didn't know what I didn't know really at that time. I was very young. I was in my 20s, and I didn't know what I was really observing, except that I knew these people were happy and they were aged, much older than people I had ever known or ever met. And they were doing it they were doing hard work. And so when I traveled back through Japan, I was noticing that aging people were very active, and very limber, not like I'd noticed in the States, where I hadn't seen people like that, they had a good stride. They walked fast. They were climbing. I would go to festivals in the mountains, and I would notice that, and I used to say little old ladies, but I don't say that anymore. But at those days, I used to think that. I used to think, look at them go. And they would pass me on the mountains. They would be climbing up these mountains in such good shape that I started noticing there's something different here in this culture. There's something happening in this culture that's really keeping the people more limber, keeping the aging process, it not letting it wear you down, and being more fulfilled and satisfied in their life. And while I was there in 1982, the Department of Forestry and the Director of Agriculture came up with a plan to help people who were going through burnout from technology, and also to increase the love of forests and trees, and to help people just take care of themselves by going into nature. And they called this program Shinrin Yoku. Shinrin Yoku. And Shinrin, thank you. Thank you. That's it. Yes, thank you, Pat. Shinrin Yoku is translated as forest bathing. And I am actually experiencing it right here today. So I'm in front of a forest, and it's being with the trees, it's being with nature, it's being feeling happy with your senses, and really absorbing what's happening in nature. Shinrin Yoku. And so they brought that out to introduce to the Japanese public. And the translation again is forest bathing.
Very nice, but does not involve necessarily any water except what might be in the running streams on the property.
And no nudity. No one is washing, no one is bathing their body. They're bathing their soul. They're bathing the five senses. It's about smelling, sensing, seeing, feeling, all your senses in working with nature, so that you can feel the difference of the calmness of nature, listening to the birds, listening to the trees sway. And what's really so interesting, Pat, is that this concept has now been adopted by the people in our country and all over the world, I would imagine. There's articles now in the New York Times, there's articles in the Wall Street Journal about Shinrin Yoku. There's even, and I saw this yesterday, and this was really surprising to me, you can learn to become a practitioner. You can study Shinrin Yoku and take a group of people out into the forest. So now people are offering certificate programs to be a practitioner or a guide of Shinrin Yoku in the US, all for $97. Not bad.
And those park rangers who have been taking people on tours of our national parks for years and pointing out the different flora and fauna and how to respect the national parks and not to break off flowers and not to take away rocks, all those things are respecting nature.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the interesting thing that the researchers in Japan, because they did research this program since they wanted to see if it was being successful, and they found they used to have, they researched people in groups that were going out into nature and then people that weren't going out into nature. And they found that the people that actually practiced Shinrin Yoku, people who went and walked in nature and walked amongst the trees and smelled the forest and did all those things that they were supposed to do in Shinrin Yoku. But those people had lowered their blood pressure, had better immunity, had better memory, and they were able to test them. So this is a scientifically proven principle that being in nature can be very, very, very healing for people. And the interesting part was the people who actually tested well and had seen these remarkable improvements in their life didn't really know that this was happening. So it's a very unconsciousness feeling of walking in nature and just improving your health and your well-being. And it's just so very simple to do.
And I would encourage you, if, as you're watching this program, either live with us or in the recording, to, after you finish, walk outside and
Yeah.
take a little walk somewhere where you're surrounded by trees and flowers. This is an ideal time of the year to do it.
Yes.
You've talked with us about forest bathing. You've talked with us about ikigai. What other types of concepts did you bring back from Japan once you returned?
Hmm. Well, there's one that I really liked a lot because I deal with in my book, I deal with the problems of aging and people feeling um, that they're getting too old to look for new jobs or to leave a job and to change a career. And so the process of wabi sabi, and I just love that wabi sabi. Thank you, Pat. And there it is. Wabi sabi deals with imperfection and accepting imperfection. And along with that is accepting aging, accepting the challenges, accepting the process of the natural process of the body aging, and knowing that it's okay and it's still a thing of beauty. And dealing with what we used to call the cracks, the cracks that happen, and just being able to know that it's all natural and it's all good. And we talked about last week, Pat, you talked about being perfect, um, and not to be perfect when you're writing, to not really look for perfection. So wabi sabi really is a wonderful concept that really reinforces that, that don't accept to um, that you're going to be perfect, but look at the imperfect is okay. Accept the imperfect. And wabi sabi goes along with another concept. So they go hand in hand. Actually, they're a pair. And that other one is kintsugi. There it is, kintsugi. We don't mention the T. Kintsugi is a process that talks about broken, and this is something dear to my heart because I'm forever thinking, what am I going to do with these broken dishes? And kintsugi gives you a very good idea of what you can do with them. It talks about broken pottery. When something is broken, it has cracks in it, and you're afraid now you're going to have to throw out something that you've loved so much. But if you practice kintsugi, which means you fix broken pottery with gold lacquer. Isn't that
Mm.
beautiful? I love that, Pat, as a concept. So you make from something that's broken, and this again goes along with wabi sabi, where you're looking at aging and thinking that, oh, I'm too old, or look at me now, and I'm not like I was before. You really aren't going to be like you were before. And in kintsugi, when you break the pottery, it's going to be different. But if you fill it with gold lacquer, fill the cracks with gold lacquer, you create something of more beautiful and more treasured. And that's what we are as we age. It's the wisdom, the experience, the life that we've lived, the information that we've gathered, and what we give to others. We're more beautiful and more special and more precious. And that's wabi sabi mixed with kintsugi. It's a pairing of the two concepts, and it's very beautiful, beautiful concepts. And this is why the Japanese is such a beautiful society around aging, because they really understand aging.
And you brought up, as you brought up wabi sabi, it made me think about the Amish. I went to a
Mm.
quilt exhibition many years ago,
Oh,
and
nice.
I learned one thing that has stuck with me, which is that the Amish deliberately leave a mistake in a quilt. And they do
Mm.
so because they say that only God makes perfect things.
Mm.
And when I
Beautiful.
get frustrated with myself because, I find a typo in one of the books I've written or the typo in an email, I think only God makes perfect things. It's okay. Striving for perfection can, as we talked about last year, prevent you from
Mm.
accomplishing your goals because
Mm.
it's never good enough to release. And it sounds like the wabi sabi concept within the Japanese
Mm.
culture embraces
Mhm.
imperfection
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
recognizes it's part of life.
It's part of life. And it really focuses on aging, which is part of life. It's the natural process. We all age. From the minute we're born, we age, actually. We don't see it at that point, but we do see it when we come into our 40s and 50s. And so many of my clients are so fearful of aging. And our whole culture says, oh, this is what you need to do to stay young and look young. But the truth is, there's nothing wrong with aging. It's a good thing. and we right, Pat? And we need to accept the imperfection. And I love that example of the Amish quilt. They really understand it, yes. And yes, if you see a misspelling or an error in a book that you've written, accept the imperfection. It's really okay to accept it and to not obsess over it, which is what we do in our culture. So I think that wabi sabi and kintsugi are two beautiful concepts that we need to absorb and understand more and use more within our culture.
One of the things that I had an opportunity to experience when I was in Japan was a Japanese tea ceremony. I wondered if you could share what your experiences were like with that, and then I'll
Mm,
share what happened during ours.
mm. Chado. There you go. Chado. Chardo. It's a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. It's a very slow, meditative, mindful opportunity to sit with yourself and really contemplate. It's a slowing down process to keep yourself within the moment, within the awareness of the moment. And it's a mixing of matcha, which is this green tea powder, which could be bitter to some people, but it's a very healing powder. Matcha is extremely healthy. And I encourage people to, when they buy green tea, to look for matcha in the tea bags that you're buying, because that's the strongest and that's the healthiest type of green tea that you can drink. And so they use that in the powdered form. And it could be a very long process. I don't know how long yours was that you're going to tell us about, Pat, but it can go on for a very long time. And at first, it could be very like, oh my gosh, how can I sit here? And once you get into the moment and into the awareness and into the feeling, it's this meditation and this mindfulness that just calms the body and calms the soul. And it's a process actually that I use with my clients. If I may share that, I'd love to share that story if I may, Pat. That I used to make tea, and I'd use tea bags, but it was matcha tea. We didn't mix the powder because we didn't have time to really sit and do that. But I would serve tea when my clients would come in, and I worked with people who were pretty anxious at the time when they would come to see me, and we would sit and we would savor the tea for a few minutes. So we would sit and we would just contemplate the tea, nothing else. The taste, the feeling in the room, the atmosphere, not why they were there to see me, not why I was there to help them or to teach them or do anything, but just to savor the moment in the tea. And it was such a calming experience. And it was such a wonderful experience that when I didn't have a kitchen to make hot tea, I would then serve cold tea. And it worked almost as well because it gave us an opportunity to stop and to calm down.
Hmm.
And your experience, Pat, I mean, you get to hear it.
Yeah, not so calming, actually. We walked in and we removed our shoes. which felt
Mm-hmm.
very natural to my husband and I because my husband is from India. And in the Indian culture, like the Japanese culture, there was a belief that you bring dirt in from outside and you don't want to bring that dirt into your house.
Mm.
We were served tea. We were served a vegetarian meal, which was wonderful for my husband and I, starting with miso soup and with
Mm.
a variety of vegetables that were put in a tempura batter and cooked.
Mm.
The people with us, the other two couples, were pure meat eaters, and they kept waiting for the meat course, and they were uncomfortable with
Mm.
the vegetarian food. And then, unfortunately, there was somebody's hair that got into one of my colleagues' soup. And she, at that point, was turned off. She didn't want to eat another thing. She looked at the
Oh my.
She
Oh
showed it to
my.
the waiter showed it to the head chef. There was very concerned conversation going on. They tried to bring her something as a replacement. She didn't want it. They were mortified. She was upset. My husband and I were just enjoying the vegetarian food, but we were the only ones who were enjoying the vegetarian food. We considered it the best meal of our trip. They were, in the meantime, they being the other four people, were going to McDonald's for meals. And we wanted Japanese food. So this was our opportunity to get Japanese food, but not quite the experience that we
Mm.
anticipated.
Oh, what what a shame. I'm glad you enjoy the food at least, but you wonder why would these people want to go to a tea ceremony? They didn't, and this is the problem of people traveling, particularly in the Japanese culture or a culture that's foreign, of not understanding the cultural mores of the culture, you know, and not even participating in things that you don't really feel comfortable in. They probably shouldn't have been there. What a shame. But at least you enjoyed the food. And as you were
Mhm.
mentioning the food, I was starting to think, I think I'd like to go get some Japanese food this afternoon.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it is a challenge if you have a specific way that you consider food. If you're a meat and potatoes
Mm.
consumer, and then you have an opportunity to experience something very different, that can be challenging.
Mm.
I enjoy cooking and I enjoy
Mm.
making new things. So there was a period in my life, Renee, when I
Mm.
made a new thing for dinner for about 10 years, never
Wow.
repeated anything.
No kidding. That's
And my
great.
husband, he is a very good sport about this.
Mm-hmm.
We are now both almost totally vegetarian. So there are infinite number of things that you can do with pastas and vegetables. Cheese and tomatoes can go together so many different ways. But I have a colleague whose husband says, I got to have the same thing. Every Monday, I got to have this. Every Tuesday, I got to have that. Every Wednesday, I got to have this. And I would never stay married to such a person because I enjoy experimenting.
Yes, I hear that. How lucky your husband is.
We'll remind him.
Yeah. What a fortunate man. Did you hear that? Yeah. And not only is it wonderful to experiment and to be eating a good diet like you're eating, but it's also one of the diets in Ikigai, you know, what of the reason for being and the reason that the people in Hokkaido, Okinawa, sorry, in Okinawa, probably Hokkaido too, have these lived to such an old age because they eat mostly plant-based foods. They don't eat meat. And the Seventh Day Adventists, who are the other blue zone in the U.S.,
Hmm.
in Loma Linda, California, they don't eat meat. And they
Hmm.
only eat vegetables and plant food, and they don't smoke, they don't drink liquor. So all of that, we don't realize what an effect that has on our body and on our spirit and on our soul. So you and your husband will have a very, very long life and a healthy one.
When my husband first came to the United States, somebody encouraged him to eat ham, and he
Oh,
didn't know what ham was. They told him that it was a special vegetable.
oh
So
no.
he ate the ham, and then his friends were laughing at him. He was a college student getting his master's degree here, and they told him what he had eaten, that it was pig. And that night he had a dream that there were a whole parade of pigs
Oh,
walking by him saying,
oh,
I died for Raj. I died for
oh,
Raj. I died for
oh,
Raj.
oh, oh,
He never touched ham again.
oh, poor man. You know, if only that could happen to other people who were eating, maybe then we'd save a lot of pigs' lives. I too am vegetarian. Basically, I do eat meat every once a month, maybe once in 2 months, just for healthy other purposes. But I think that a vegetarian diet is extremely important, and that's what the people believe in all of these five blue zones, that eating vegetables, eating plant food is really the better way to go. So I'm glad that Raj has recovered. And, and with your wonderful cooking, Pat, has no more nightmares.
No, no more nightmares. Tell us a little bit more about some of the self-care practices that you learned in Japan.
Okay, well, what I learned another one that I think was very important, and that was Jishin Yo Yaku. And there it is, Jishin Yo Yaku. And this translates as self care. So it's really about learning how to take care of yourself. And this is so very important because in our culture, and for so many of us, we become workaholics. And the Japanese also have a history, and people think of them as workaholics, as working, working, working. And so this Jinsen Yoyaku was created to help people realize that they need to take some time in their daily life, every day in their daily life, to schedule something that is self-nurturing, some self-nurturing time. And this could be anything. And Pat, you had mentioned to people after our talk today to go out and take a walk. That could be one thing. I had a client who was a lawyer several years ago. He was working in a law firm, and you might know that in law firms, they work you very hard, and it's very hard to take a break. And he would eat at his desk. He would eat his lunch at his desk and keep working. And he was always getting indigestion. And that was one of his complaints when he came to see me, is that he never felt well. And is it a wonder? You know, he never had time to digest his food. He was just eating and working and eating and working. And I suggested that maybe he can put down his work, close his computer, and go outside for a short walk. And he said, oh, I can't do that. No, I can't leave my work. And I said, well, what will happen? He said, well, I really don't know. So he didn't even know if it would be something would happen and that he couldn't do it. And so he tried. He said, okay, I'll try to go out, but I won't eat my lunch. I'll just go for a walk. And so we agreed to 15 minutes. He went out and took a walk for 15 minutes. So that was his self-nurturing time, his 15-minute walk. He then increased it, which is another Japanese, which I don't think I gave you this one, Pat, but it's Kaizen, Kaizen, which talks about doing things in increments, slow little tiny steps. So he would go out, Kaizen. He would go out and take a tiny step, which is this 15 minutes away from his desk and out of the office. And then he would see that this was kind of nice. You know, he was enjoying it, and he was starting to smile, which he never did during the day. And he would take 20 minutes. Thank you. That's it. Kaizen. He would take a 20-minute walk. And then he'd think, this isn't so bad. And when I go back, I even work quicker and better. And then he decided on a half-hour walk. So small little incremental steps of taking care and nurturing yourself. You don't have to start big. Just something very small. And that's what he did. And ultimately, he actually decided that he would go out and take an hour for lunch. And that was like, wow, okay. This was Jinsen Yo Yaku, taking care of yourself on a daily basis with self-nurturing time, knowing your work-life balance, how to create a work-life balance for yourself, how to take care, how to really nurture yourself. And it could be, if you're not working, it could be just going out, as Pat suggested, taking a walk, going out into nature, being here amongst the trees and smelling the flowers and looking at the trees. Or it could be just listening to music, or it could be stopping. And maybe you have a hobby that you love to do, something that's self nurturing, something that takes care of yourself, that takes your mind away from the busyness of work, the busyness of your daily activities. So it's a work life balance, and it's an opportunity to know what you can do to schedule on a daily, and it has to be daily, but it could only be, it doesn't have to be long. And what they're saying with this practice is if you use 20 minutes, it's okay. 20 minutes to calm yourself down and to do something nurturing for yourself. Very, very important. Could be just getting up if you're working with a client or you're working with a patient, just taking 20 minutes to go for a short walk somewhere, or even to look out a window, and look at the sky, just to change your environment, to change your focus, and to know that you're nurturing yourself. So this is a very important one. Shijin Yoyaku, self-care. And the Japanese know how to do this.
They do. And it's a great concept, Renee. I used it inadvertently just this morning because I recorded a video outside and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't showing up on my iPhone pictures. I could see it in the app, but I couldn't figure out how to get it into the pictures so I could put it on my computer. And I tried for half an hour, everything I knew, checked the help file, couldn't figure it out. I sent a help email message and I said, this is it. I'm just going to go out, pick up some medications that are ready and walk away from it. And when I came back, I had an email from the company explaining to me how to get that video off my phone. And I felt just so much better having walked away from a frustration that I couldn't solve, only to find the answer when I came home. It was like an extra gift for today.
Isn't that wonderful? That's a wonderful story. I love that as an example. And it seems like, oh, this was a miracle, but it wasn't a miracle. You played a big role in it. You made a decision. You were aware of your frustration. You were aware that you needed to do something different, that you needed to take a break, you needed to step outside, and you needed to take care of yourself. And it was almost as if the company knew that. and we're there to help you. And isn't that what happens in life so much of the time? We get so frustrated and we keep going and going and going. And it doesn't help because that frustration builds up. It builds up, and the anxiety builds up, and the stress builds up, and we make ourselves sick. And that's no good. It's not very good for longevity and for health and healing and wellness. So thank you for sharing, Pat. That's a great example.
You're welcome. You spent time in Japan. You spent time living there. You've made several trips back, which has deepened your understanding of the principles that you've shared with us in terms of fostering well-being. How did you incorporate that into your practice as a mental health practitioner?
That's great. I'm glad you asked me that question because people might be thinking, well, these are pretty foreign to me. They even have strange names. How am I going to remember these names? Well, Pat put them up for you to write down. And I suggest that you actually do some research and look further into them because you can find out a lot more about more than what we're talking about today. But I did use them. For me, it was a wonderful discovery that I can use these concepts with my clients to help them and help them incorporate these concepts into their life. For a time, I worked with teachers who were unhappy in their job. I worked with teachers who were suffering, who were stressed, and I worked for a program called the Peer Intervention Program, which was through the United Federation of Teachers. And my role was to get them to be more relaxed, to get them happier, and to get them to leave teaching. Because this is what they really wanted, but they were so fearful to do that. And so I was able to use these concepts to really help them see, and particular ikigai, that was an enormous important concept that we looked at the four quadrants that surrounded ikigai. Doing what you love. Do you love what you're doing? And most of them would say no, they don't love what they're doing. And then I would say, well, are you good at it? And they'd say, no, I'm not good at it. Then we'd go to the next one. We say, are you helping someone? Are you showing the world that you're giving and you're on a mission? And same no. And then the last one, are you getting paid? Okay, they were getting paid. And that's why they were staying. But one out of three was just not enough for a reason for getting up in the morning. And that's what ikigai is. It's the reason to get up in the morning. It's your purpose in life. It's what makes you happy. It's what makes you satisfied. So being able to explain this out of the realm of traditional psychology, traditional counseling practices, but looking at it from a foreign culture, looking at it with strange words, which gave them an opportunity to think differently about their life. That many of them, and I worked in this program for over 10 years, and I found that many of them were able to accept that, okay, this is not working. This is not working. This is not happiness for me. This is not what I want in my life. And one of my clients, Bill, he looked at these and he said, whoa, none of these work for me except the money. And I'm getting out and I'm going to do what I love. And then we could work on what does he love? And so I was able to, in my practice, which is really what my practice mostly focuses on, is what do you love to do? What are your values? What's important to you? What are your interests? What makes you happy? And what made Bill happy was photography. And so that's what he loved, and that's what he was good at. And that's what he felt his mission was, to take beautiful photographs and have a show in a gallery and to get paid. So he changed his ikigai from the teaching, which didn't suit him at all, to working as a freelance photographer and traveling around the world taking beautiful photographs. And he did come back and had a great show in a gallery and did make money selling his pictures. So it worked. It was a very effective, and they're all very effective, because I found that when people were so stressed and so anxious about their work, they weren't really ready to listen to traditional counseling practices and traditional types of assessments that I would give them. They really wanted something else. And that's what the Japanese concepts were. They were something else. They were exotic. They were different. They were something that people felt, wow, if I can master that, then I really will be okay, because look at the Japanese culture. So it was a pretty, they proved pretty effective. Little did I realize when I was traveling in Japan that I could actually use these concepts and use what I was learning and use what I was observing of the culture and of the blue zones and the people in Okinawa and the people throughout Japan who were living good, rich, healthy, happy lives, that I could bring that back and use that with the teachers in the New York City school system. So it was a great find for me, and it was very, very effective. And people became happier and more satisfied with their life. And I still use them with my clients. You know, we still drink tea, green tea. Mm-hmm. I always serve green tea when people come in to see me. And I also, in terms of the nature, which is behind me, we can't always go out in nature. So I would show pictures in my office. I would hang pictures of trees for people to look at. And that would be the substitute, because even looking at a picture of nature and looking at a picture of trees can calm your spirit. And what would happen is that people would start to bring me pictures that they had taken of trees and of nature. So wonderful, wonderful concepts. And Shinjin Yoyaku of self-care was something we always talked about. And I would ask people, what was one thing that you can do to change your daily routine that could include one thing of self-care in your day? And sometimes it was even hard for people who were working so hard and so stressed and so struggling in their jobs to think of one thing. But one thing, one small thing, Kaizen, one small thing. So all of these concepts blend together to help the whole person, which is really what my counseling and my work has always been about, helping the whole person. So it was a great opportunity for me to realize that I can use these. they could be effective, and they could help so many people to have a happier, richer, more satisfied life, personally and professionally.
What a wonderful summary of the impact of these concepts on you and how many people that you've helped by implementing those concepts.
Yeah, it's been a joy. It's a joy to see people become happy and relaxed and live a life full and rich. It's the concept again of wabi sabi and kintsugi, of really enjoying the cracks, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that there are cracks in life, knowing that we will age, knowing that there will be issues, that we're not perfect in what we do. We're not perfect in our appearance as we age. We're not perfect in so much. Perfection is really out there, and not to be able to try to keep grabbing it and trying to go for it, but to accept the imperfect and to know that it's okay, and to know that it's up to you to take care of yourself. It's so important. And one thing I've just found out is that the Blue Zones, which is an amazing opportunity, there are so many books. Just Google the books on the Blue Zones. There's the initial book was written by Dan Butna in, I think it was 2008. But now there are new books going. There's a book on the Blue Zones and Ikigai, how to use Ikigai to deal with a divorce. People are using it in all ways, in all kinds of places, and all kinds of issues that are coming up in life and work. And there's going to be, I think I've read this, a Netflix special on the Blue Zones. So I think that's pretty exciting. I hope that's true and that happens, because here in the U.S. we need to understand Ikigai. We need to understand these concepts. We need to be happier in our longevity, because we're all living longer. We need to be happy in our life as we live longer. And if we're not happy, not in our life, but in our work, we need to find work that satisfies us and really makes us happy and fulfills us. And that's my job.
And this is an opportunity to put anything in the chat that you would like to ask Renee about. I saw a comment earlier from Hamad Shah, who said that he agreed with you in adapting to the culture and the rewards of that, as well as the challenges.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, I don't see anything in the chat.
You mentioned earlier, Renee, about your book. I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to share the title of that book and what else you are working on right now. And I'm displaying your email address in case anyone would like to connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Yeah, please, if you would like, I have, as I mentioned, 2 podcasts coming up on intergenerational communication, which is the area that I'm focusing on now, that and aging in the workforce, and how people of different generations can get along in the workforce. So I have 2 new podcasts in the near future, and I have 2 recordings of podcasts that I gave to interviews in the UK. And if you would like a copy of those, please email me. My email is up there. Thanks so much, Pat. And I will send you a link to both of those recordings. And if you have any questions about any of these concepts, or I would love also to hear from anyone who has used these concepts. Let me know how they were and how they worked for you. Or if you are going to use them, please let me know what's happened and how they've worked in your life, and what they've done to change or not change, or anything about it, please. I love to hear people's comments, and I love to hear how things that we've talked about have affected people and have helped people to move or not move. So no, please contact me and let me know. We'd love to hear from you. And my book is Achieving the Good Life After 50, Tools and Resources for Making It Happen. It's on Amazon. You can get it there. And it's about how to live your life when you're, and people have said to me, what do you mean 50? So my new book, which I was working on, is How to Achieve a Good Life 60 plus to make people happy who keep saying to me, what about 60? But 50 plus is good enough. So, you know, we go up 60, 70, 80, it's all the same. How do you enjoy life? And I'll be using some of these concepts in the book. And I have another new book that's coming out that is also about assessment and using some of these Japanese concepts to find out what makes you happy and what is your purpose in life, so that you can live a fulfilled, satisfied, happy life full of wonderful things and enjoy what you're doing and not be like that poor man in Ikigai, in Ikiru, the Japanese film that started it all for me. But I also suggest, if you can get a copy of that film, Ikiru, Ikiru, it will really change your life to say, I need to do something different. And what am I doing? It's the most beautiful. Thank you. One of those. Have you seen it, Pat? Do you know this movie?
I have
Well,
not.
well, I highly recommend it. It was one of Kurosawa's best films. And then after that, I highly recommend all the samurai films, if you don't mind all the fighting. they really have another message in them about how to take care of yourself and how to be aware and how to be mindful and how to meditate and how to really, I guess it's mindfulness is the most important thing in all of Akira Kurosawa's films. And in this film, how to live your life fully and richly so that you can live a good, happy, long life. And if we're going to live good, happy, good lives, long lives, why not be happy? Why not be happy at the same time?
Thank you, Renee. That is a wonderful note in which to end this program. We appreciate so much what you have shared. We appreciate the people who have been watching this or will watch the recording. Any last tip or bit of advice that you'd like to share, Renee, before we close off?
Yeah, the last tip that I would like to say is that how we can still practice some of these wonderful concepts when we live in a big city, which is most of us, is that you can go out. Here I am in a park. I'm demonstrating what one can do. You can go out into a park, into a city park. There are so many now in New York, and I know in several of the other big cities that there are little pocket parks. Go into the park and listen to the birds, smell the flowers, watch the trees sway. Just do that for 20 minutes a day. Every day that you can, go out for a walk 20 minutes. If you can't leave where you are and you're working, get up from where you are when you're sitting 20 seconds. Doesn't have to be 20 minutes if you can't do it. 20 seconds, stand up and stretch and move your body. Movement in nature, observing, listening, smelling the sights and sounds around you are very, very healing. And if none of that you can do, take a picture of a tree and put it in your wallet. Carry it with you. Keep it on your desk. Look at nature. Be reminded of the beauty and the quiet and calmness that nature gives us, that it affords us this beauty. And take care of yourself. We're all going to live to a good old ripe age if we do all of these wonderful things and are happy and fulfilled in our life. Stay healthy, stay happy, and stay safe. And thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much, Renee.